Welcome to the Time Management Podcast with me, your host, Abigail Barnes. I'm a productivity coach, global speaker, time management author, and award-winning entrepreneur on a mission to share the 888 formula with the world and to remind you that it's your time. Leave it to me to bring you new time management tips, tricks, tools, and strategies, to introduce you to guests, research, and case studies from around the world, and to give you a simple 5-step process you can follow to uplevel your productivity, achieve your goals, and create a life that exceeds your wildest dreams. I'm so excited that you're here, so let's get started. Welcome to the show. I am so excited and delighted to bring you this week's guest, Elliot Kay. Elliot, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I've known Elliot for a while, and it is going to be such an incredible conversation. We are going to talk about so many things. Let's just dive straight in. Who is Elliot Kay in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, Elliot Kay is an unlimited being, only limited by his physical body. Ooh, I bet you never had that answer before. But besides that, I am a father of two very energetic and demanding, amazing young souls. I live on the coast in the UK, the Jurassic Coast. So I live in Devon, which is like the California of the UK. For those of you wondering, I need an association. It's sunny, it's beautiful, but it's not sunny all year round. I've currently written 6 books. I actually written 7th, but only published 6. I've got a 7th sitting here right now on my laptop, and I have won awards as an entrepreneur, as a speaker. I've also been shortlisted at the Business Book Awards a couple of years ago, and I'm also a judge for the Business Book Awards. But what I do, in a nutshell, is I run a series of brands that support expert speakers to get out there, whether it be through delivery, or whether it be through marketing, whether it be through community, whether it be through awards. I run a bunch of brands that do that on top of everything I do in my life. And yes, so that's me in a nutshell. But remember what I said, I am an unlimited being, only limited by the physical presence of my body. Nice and deep.
I am loving this and very excited to unpack this conversation, see where we take it. Tell us about your relationship with time over the years in the early days.
Yeah, I mean, I think something I didn't mention, which I guess where my kind of relationship with time really began, is I also used to be a professional dancer. And so time is definitely has its stamp on you as a professional dancer, as a trainee dancer, because it is about being on time for lessons or for auditions. It's about, because I remember when I started training, I started very late. I started 21, right? So it's not like I was a dancer young. And I just remember someone that was 2 minutes late for a lesson and they weren't allowed in. And so you have this stamp on time, knowing you have to be there, you have to be early. I mean, I believe leaders are early. And that's always played a big part in my DNA, in my makeup. I'm very respectful of time. I'm always one of the early people there. I think to the detriment sometimes of my wife and I's relationship, because she's very laid back about time. And I'm like, look, let's go. We need to get going. But over the years, to answer your questions, I've learned to relax a lot about that. And I remember reading a book talking about the concept of time and how actually when we relax into it and we believe in it, then actually we can control time. I don't mean we can move a clock forwards with our mind, but I understood that by not being so stressed out about it and actually believing in the concept, it's to do with physics. I don't ask me the back and I don't know the physics of it, but you can actually control time. And therefore, instead of thinking you'll be late or worrying you'll be late, I mean, I'm never late, by the way. That's one of my things. But you just go, okay, you let go. And then actually you get to the place you needed to go. So let's say you're stuck in a traffic jam, which I think everyone can relate to. And then you normally you're like, come on, I need to get going. Let's get going. When you actually go, wait a minute, I control time. I'm going to make it back on time. And I'm not talking about affirmations. I'm talking about something very deep and kind of neuro pathway, something bigger than us. That changed my relationship with time a lot. So time to me is something that is definitely gives me a framework, but something I've learned to relax about over the years. But it's still quite dominant. I'm still never late. I'm always early. I've learned not to get offended when people are late. So I've learned not to let people's relationship of time affect my beingness, my presence, my mind.
You are talking my language. I am so excited to hear somebody who is on that same wavelength when it comes to time and spending time. When I read The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks and he talked about Einstein time, that suddenly opened my mind to what was possible.
That was the book that changed it for me as well.
Fantastic. And we have just launched a brand new program called Magic Time, exploring and unpacking this concept. Newton is what most of our time is based on, and Newton was around in the 16th century. That's not to say that the work that he did isn't relevant still today, but it's just to say, if you would be open to, if you would consider that your language creates your life, why would you stress yourself out by saying, I'm going to be late, I'm going to be late, I'm going to be late? Why not say, I'm always on time? And I absolutely love that. How did you come to do the work that you do today?
Yes, it's an actual evolution, right? So I told you I used to be a professional dancer. And I started very late when I was 21. I graduated 25 and I had a bit of a short career. So I got injured when I was 30, proper, typical dancer, did my back end kind of story. And then I found myself in training. And then from training, I was like, wait a minute, I want to be a really great trainer. So I discovered coaching. And then I started studying coaching. And it was the days when you really had to study coaches that you had, that I had to do a 3-month course, not like a weekend. And everyone goes, congratulations, you're a coach. Right. And I had to work with 15 people. But as part of that, I got invited to a seminar. So I went to a seminar, typical big room, 5,000 people. It wasn't Tony Robbins before you think it's Tony Robbins. And I went, wait a minute, I can do that. And that was kind of my moment, with what I call like welcome naivety, because I didn't quite understand what really went into being a speaker. But I just went, I can do that. And then I did. And it's interesting that night I went, I can do that. I left that seminar and someone handed me a public speaking training flyer, come join our training. So I did, and then I signed up with them, and then I ended up working with them for 5 years, touring the world as a trainer for public speaking. But throughout that, we'd launched what was Pony Express, which is now Speaker Express, which is how we came across each other with back then my co-founder Anik, who you know. So I've been doing this now, in terms of a business and something for coming on to over a decade. So it's 2011 when we launched it. So coming on to 14 years now. And that's how I ended up doing it. It's just, it was a strong decision made, pursued with action, and therefore found the path to do it. And I've been doing it ever since. I've evolved, I've changed, I've shifted, our messaging has changed, but that's how I've ended up doing what I'm doing today. This is how we came across each other as well.
What is absolutely incredible as you're sharing your story is that I also went to an event. There were probably 5,000 people in the room. I saw somebody speak and I had the exact same voice that said, I want to do that. And it's almost like you are describing my exact mind chatter, because I had that I want to do that, not having any clue or idea of how you actually go about doing it, which is why our paths crossed. Because then I realized that if you want to be somebody different, you need to train with somebody who actually is walking that same path or has walked that same path, so that you can learn what it is that you don't know. I love it. Tell us some examples of clients that you're working with. Why would they come to you, and what kind of transformation is it that they are experiencing as a result of that?
I've got my mastermindees, and they're very much at the beginning. They're finding their way. They're experts already, by the way, just for the record. These are very highly trained. Their expertise is very high, but they're adding in speaking. And I've arranged, I have a guy that's like in Luxembourg, and I've got someone in America, and I've got, it's very international. And with them, it's very much going, here's the fundamental part of building your marketing side of your business. So I am doing some delivery with them, but with them it's marketing. So your show reel, your website, all the assets you need to be a professional speaker. So I'm working with them, and they're already starting to shift their messaging, their positioning, and therefore they're landing different speaking opportunities, but also they're delivering different talks. So versus the ones they normally would deliver. So that's kind of my mastermind group. They are at the beginning of their speaking journey. A lot of my one-to-one clients are people already down that path. They've already done some speaking in some way, and they want to truly deliver world-class talks, right? So I work with a lot of speakers in my one-to-ones that are sort of your 5K upwards space. And they are people that go, look, I know I can be better at what I do. They understand the importance of investing for them to go to another level. So one of them, for example, won Speaker of the Year 2 years running at the Speaker Awards here in the UK. And she came to me, this is someone that is doing big gigs. She's a 10K plus speaker. This isn't someone that's like, I'm nervous, I need help. Like, she knows how to own a room. And she just said, I know I can be better. I know there's something I can tweak. Can you tell me what it is? So with her, it was about watching what she did. So she sent me, and then giving her feedback. And that's something that I do again a lot with people. So she's one of them. Recently, I worked with someone who she's got quite an interesting job, because she writes manuals. Right. But her job is to make the manuals interesting. So she kind of, when she speaks, she talks about the importance of digestive information for manuals. And again, we kind of tweaked her whole structure, her whole ability to deliver it shifted. Now, this is someone that's highly established. And for her, as a result, just people completely changed how they perceive manuals in their business, away from big, thick pieces of paper to bite-sized videos. And that came from how she communicated that. And it's a couple of years ago now, but this creative agency came to me, and creatives are like, oh, I just do, man. I just do. Like, how do you create these? And these are people that get brands into supermarkets. So they're not, they're not low level designers. These are highly trained designers. They work with big brands to get noticed on shelves, right? So it's really important. And I was like, how do you do this? What do you do? And they're like, well, man, it's just in our heads. I'm like, no, that's not going to work from a talk. So pulling it out of them to put them into structure. Then, of course, then you introduce structure. Like, oh, man, I don't deal well with structure. Like, well, you're going to have to do this if you want it. And so with them, it's a bit of a tussle. But we got there. They followed the structure, and they were blown away themselves, because once they stuck to the structure, delivered what we agreed, they actually had people queuing up to find out more, to work with them. And these aren't small budget people, but he said, I've got a testimonial somewhere, it just transformed. So those are some of the results. Those are some of the professionals. So I've got group programs for people at a certain level, but one-to-one, you kind of have to be a certain level for me to want to work with you. And that's more not because, oh, I'm so, I won't work with people. It's because there's a certain shift, a certain understanding, and a certain commitment that will take to do that kind of training. That's all. That's what it is. Not like I never work with anyone just starting out one-to-one. Not the case.
There's so many ways I want to take this conversation on, but the place that I feel is best to start is around fees and speaking and learning and starting out, because it is a big conversation, and it is certainly one that a journey that I have been on, and I'm sure it's a journey that you were on as well. At the beginning, you speak for free, and then when do you start charging? You mentioned that you have some clients at 5K, some at 10K. Let's just really unpack what that actually means, because I don't feel that it's truly clear. There's lots of conversations that come up with people. How much should I charge? And then when you speak to other people, they're very clear about what their speaker fees are. So just give us a top level 60-second overview of speaking and fees and how you even figure it out.
Okay, 60 seconds. Right. So first question you ask is, do I want to do this gig? Second question you ask is, do they pay what I'd like them to pay? If you've answered yes to I want to do this gig, and then it's a matter of deciding that you're willing to accept what they pay or what they don't, because you want to do the gig. If they don't pay and you want to do the gig, then there's finding a different commercial element. So how can you sell? Can you get testimonial? Can you get footage? And then it's a decision if you want to. So that's your 60 seconds kind of sussing out the whole speaking industry. There you go. 3 key questions. When it comes to getting paid, you need to get to a level to understand the problem you're solving and the value that has in the marketplace. See, a lot of people think they're selling their speaking, but you're not. You're selling the problem you solve, unless you're an after dinner speaker. That's fine. That's entertainment, right? But in terms of what we're talking about, expert speech, it's about the expertise of the problem you're solving. And that problem will have a value. You need to determine the value of the problem you're solving, and therefore the fee must reflect that. Knowing the industry you're entering helps. So if you're going to speak in front of lawyers, the fee will be very different. Again, a lot of people in the mental health space, for example, that's not a highly paid industry as a speaker. But with right positioning, with the right understanding the problem you solve, it allows you to justify your value. So there's your 60 seconds. Pow.
So our fees are really determined by our transformation of the audience, is what I'm hearing you say there.
And the problem you might solve the booker, because remember, the person booking you might not be the audience. So they have a problem in mind. So they're like, look, I have an issue. My team aren't productive. They're terrible with their timekeeping. So they're your booker. And that could be anything from a CEO down to an events team, down to HR. But then the audience are the people, his team or their team, right? So they're the people you're speaking to. So the person booking might not get a transformation, but the team might. But yeah, it's the problem you solve. And this is where a lot of speakers get it wrong. I've got a great story. I've got a great this. I'm a great speaker. Great. But that doesn't tell someone the problem you solve, which can bring us on to the archetypes and why they're so important. I think understanding the value of that problem you solve. Inspiring people, while is nice, might not be enough of a problem to justify a fee unless you've done something inspirational. That's when the big bucks will happen. But if you can solve productivity and therefore create a culture that's more positive, and therefore people are staying on longer, they're liking working there, and they're hitting their targets, you've now solved a massive problem for the bottom line, which justifies your fee.
And do you think that speakers need agents to help them, or is it something that you can do yourself? How does that even work?
I did a post about this recently on LinkedIn. Bureaus and agents are a great extension of your strategy. They're part of your strategy. They're not the strategy. So again, unless you're kind of like, Branson, Brené Brown, which then you'd have a manager as well, Simon Sinek, who has to deal with such a huge volume of inbound. Yes, have agents, have speaker bureaus, but don't build your business around them. You don't need speaker bureaus. You don't need agents. They're very good to have, but you can do it on yourself. But that's where the relationship comes in. And I think the webinar you talked about the importance of developing relationships in this industry and showing up with integrity and showing up without being a diva. You can absolutely have a brilliant speaking career and never worked with a bureau and agent. You have to build those relationships. You have to show up as world class. You need to deliver world class. And you need to maintain those relationships for you to carry on getting booked. Because remember, people refer people they know, like, and trust. If you were easy to work with and you blew their audience away, you're likely to be referred to someone else in that same space.
And so you are working with clients who perhaps want to become more eloquent in how they speak to their teams, their peers, their colleagues, as well as professional speakers who it is their business. Let's unpack this archetypes, because recently you ran a webinar that I attended, because I feel it is very, very important that we should always be learning. We should always be learning from the experts as well as people who are further along the journey. And on that webinar, you actually blew my mind with how you explained your speaker archetypes. Tell us a little bit more about them and what you feel is the most important one that we should be considering.
These are archetypes I learned, when I was training with that company. I might own it in the UK, but they're not solely my concept. I just want to be transparent about that. I have adapted one or two of them to make it more mine, but the basis, you can look at people like Virginia Satir. She talks about a lot of this stuff, the blamer, the deflector. So you can look, but the 12 archetypes is more of a development of that. And they're actually archetypes of communication. And if you want to be a leader and impactful, you should certainly look to these 12 archetypes. Now, the one people are stuck in is your executive archetype. And that's just the conveyor of information, which you see all the time. You see speakers on stage and they're in their heads and they're just blurting out information. And I say this time and time again, we have lots of information around us. We don't need a speaker that's going to just give us more information. We have so many sources to get information these days. The archetype, I feel, especially in the UK, but across the world actually, that people could certainly do with learning and mastering is what I would call a caregiver. And that is being in your heart space, being open and connected in a way that people feel you and are moved by your words. And does that mean every single day that you're kind of in this deep emotional space? No, but it means you're connected. You can feel the person that's in front of you. So if you're doing a team talk, for example, let's say you do a daily buzz at your work, right? Where you get together for 15 minutes and you're doing a daily buzz. You can be in your heart space. That means you're truly present to your team. You're listening, you're taking on what they're saying, and then you're able to understand and truly have an impactful response versus let's get together, right? Here's our agenda for today. Okay, Elliot, don't talk to me about your problem right now. I'm a bit busy, but booking a meeting. If you really feel that, listen, I'm just that you would express it in a very different way. So I feel on stage, often people don't go to the caregiver archetype. they're afraid, they think it's weak, especially men of high power, which on the contrary, vulnerability is far more powerful than force. But that's the one I feel a lot of people can then go to and dare to go to, is your caregiver, but not in a sloppy, floppy, poor me way, in an empowered, strong, but vulnerable way. And that's the thing about that archetype, that it's about strength, not weakness.
Whether I am delivering a talk at work or I am standing on a stage in front of an audience, what I'm hearing you say is that I am telling stories, and the format that I deliver the stories from is going to switch on the audience or switch off the audience. And these stories, I'm assuming, are coming from the very basic storytelling hero's journey, and the archetypes have been built upon this. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be the hero's journey, right? I think that's a good example. I think it's your ability to use stories to connect and impart information. So, of course, in presentations there is information, but I do lace them with a lot of stories. You can use stories that have the hero journey and the epiphany, and then the fall, and then the rise. You can do that by all means, and then the transformation. And a lot of those stories are very, very relatable. Absolutely. I think you should have one or two of them in there. Even if you're talking about client stories, right? You can still use that kind of format. They were here. This is what was going on. They were struggling with this. We came, we did this. Then they evolved to this, and now they're here, right? So you can do that. I think what's really important where the archetypes come in is to give it more dimension. Because of course, a lot of people narrate stories. I did this, then I did this, and then this happened, and then I did this. So yeah, I was really hurt and upset, and then this happened, and now I'm okay. And it's like you've just narrated a story versus using the archetypes to be really present to the story, to really take us through the story through your eyes, and you become this facilitator of storytelling. It's really interesting because I did a talk not too long ago called "Standing on the Edge of Excellence," and that's when I talk about what does a great speaker versus an average speaker, right? Very similar to what you saw. And I tell a story about a watermelon farmer. And I got a postcard a week later from someone saying, just a breakfast at the hotel, and I thought about your watermelon story, and there was watermelon for breakfast. So I thought, there you go, here's a watermelon. So stories have a profound impact. We can all relate in different ways, unless they're a terrible story. Absolutely, they are one of your key connecting and impactful tools. But also, how you tell the story is really important.
Thank you for sharing this. I feel like we're having a one-to-one session on this podcast with you. So just for the benefit of the listener, this is actually the work that Elliot does when he is working one-to-one with his clients. He is helping people to unpack and to tell their stories in a way that are entertaining, that are educational, that are edutaining as well.
Entertaining. Oh, that's a good word.
When I was doing your training, one of the archetypes that you talked about that I really resonated with was the fairy. And I find that I have been doing what I've been doing for over a decade as well. And when you shared that if you have the ability to move into the fairy energy, this will build the connection with you in the audience, that really, really resonated with me. Tell us about the fairy archetype.
So the fairy archetype is, like everything's really new and it's exciting and it's fresh. You smelled the flower for the first time, or you've gone out and you've seen this amazing view, and you're like, wow, but not in a cheesy hammy way, right? It's kind of like I get the same questions, the same kind of thing over and over again, and it's having that excitement. It's having it's almost hearing it like it's the first time you've heard that question type response. So you might get that, oh, you don't understand. Okay. And then so when you shift into that fairy energy, you go, all right, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. You're coming from that place of intrigue and curiosity, almost like you're hearing it for the first time. And if you're able to do that, especially as a speaker, it's twofold. When you step into the fairy energy, when you start or when you're speaking, even though you might have done that 10th speaking gig and you've used the same talk and you've told the same story, story. When you step into the fairy archetype, it's new, it's fresh, you're excited to tell it, right? It's, this is great. Again, you need to work on the nuances so it's not cheesy or hammy or pantomime like he's behind you. It's not that. But also it just breathes life into something that can be completely repetitive and monotonous. So in sales calls, or when you're speaking to your team, or when you're dealing with, and it's the same thing. Okay, you have that. Let me just switch into fairy. And it can be really impactful. And there are some great people like Ellen DeGeneres has built a whole career of being fairy type. She's, when she must hear the same story again and again sometimes. Yet when she's in front of them, she's like, wow, okay, she's so excited. Well, tell me more. She's so curious. Her eyes open, her face is open. Forget what you think about her personally. And that's why I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about her. She's a typical sort of fairy archetype. Everything's always exciting. Everything's like, wow, that's amazing. Wow, tell me more about that. Oh, duh, duh, duh. And I think that she's a good example to look at in terms of a fairy archetype.
It was very interesting to be on that webinar because there is this tendency in us to say, I'm so busy, I don't have time, I know all of this stuff, I don't need to attend it. But to hear you share those archetypes and to hear you talk about particularly the fairy was really quite transformational in my mind. It helped me to recognize that when I am speaking to an audience, they don't know me. I don't know them. It is our first encounter. So why would I not be enthusiastic and excited? And then it brings me to the point and the question in myself, if I'm not enthusiastic and excited, is this something that I want to do? Which comes back to what you said at the beginning around when you agree to speak, to decide already, is this something that I actually want to do and I want to get involved in? So thank you. And just a reminder to the audience, a reminder to myself, never, ever, ever stop learning. The minute you stop learning is the minute you start to become stagnant.
Yeah, completely agree. I'm doing first aid training today for 2 days just to learn something new. But it's also because I've started rugby coaching for my son. I know not a lot about rugby, but I agree about learning something new every day.
That's absolutely fantastic. And I think it is so beneficial that we all know first aid because who knows whenever we might be called in that situation. I learnt it when I was younger, when I did the Gold Duke of Edinburgh Award, we had to do first aid as part of that. And it was just very, very beneficial. It means now that if there's ever an incident or an accident, it's always there in the back of my mind. But I would also encourage people to call the emergency services.
Yeah, of course, of course. But I think there's an interesting conversation, maybe not for now, but to do with, manifestation, law of attraction and things like that. Because for a long time I said I should do a first aid, especially with kids, I should do first aid. And I wanted to get involved more in certain other aspects of life. And then that's when, and I didn't go, oh, I'm going to be a coach. Let me look for a coaching role in terms of rugby, because I actually don't know anything about rugby, right? I'm learning I mean, they're under sixes, so the expectation isn't very high either. But it was like, okay, I'm looking for an opportunity. I want to give back. What shall I do? And then the role of coach came along. The guy was like, do you want to coach? You get involved every week. You're here every week. And then I remember thinking, oh, I could really do with first aid. And then through the club, it's like, hey, here's a first aid training. So it didn't appear how I wanted it or how I thought, but it showed up in a different way. And I've, again, over the years, talking about time, and I feel that things always show up in the way you need them to, not in the way you want them to. But that's, I think, a very different podcast and a very different interview. But I'm spotting that more and more. Maybe it's an age thing. On my vision board, which is behind me, I've got pictures of certain celebrities, and for me it represents the type of people I want to start to work with. And gradually I'm finding I'm attracting the odd celebrity. Like this year I worked with someone from The Apprentice who turned to me for their speaking, and it's kind of great. I've worked with someone from MasterChef, and I just think things are showing up, but they're not showing up how I want them. Like no one's ringing me, are you Elliot Kay? Would like to book, they're showing up in a very different way. But I think that's a very different conversation.
It is not a very different conversation. It is the exact reason that you're on this podcast. We walk the path of spirituality and strategy. We understand that it is all interconnected. And we are here to blow apart the misconceptions that we do it this way when we're doing this, we do it that way when we're doing that. Very simple, that work-life balance. There is no such thing as work-life balance. There is just life.
Yeah.
Which brings me on to what is something that you do with your time on a daily, weekly basis that you think that other people don't?
Oh, that's such an that's an interesting question. I mean, that's a big assumption to assume no one else does it. I don't think I can assume that thing. But I think something that I do on a regular basis is I connect to source, right? And people probably wouldn't think that or know that, because it's not something I'm not religious in the sense of I don't follow a religion, but I continually connect with source, call it God, call it the universe, call it what you want, but that is a daily thing, and I've been doing that for years now. It shifted, changed why I connect with source, good or bad, and it's not always, it's not about requesting things. Actually, the latest kind of thing that came to me is, how blessed am I because God is with me, right? And that's literally what's come to mind. And this isn't about, I don't want us to get stuck on the word God, but that's something that I feel that I do that a lot of people don't. And I'm not saying no one. And I can feel the shift and the lightness in me, especially when it's really hard and there's tough times, which we all have. That's kind of my go-to, something I do. Here's something I think I do that no one does. I often think of bad things I did in my life and ask for forgiveness immediately to people, right? And it might come out of nowhere. It might come about the time that I remember recently, for example, I went all the way back to primary school. I can't remember the boy's name, but I remember once they were like, there was a week I kind of, for some reason, I kicked him every time I saw him. I was very young. It's like 3 or 4. But that came to mind. So straight away I asked forgiveness of his soul, and I'm so sorry, please forgive me, and I directed at his soul. There you go. That's something I think that not a lot of people do. And again, it's not from to get something. I think it's more of a release and a healing, that clearly there's something in that I feel I need to ask for forgiveness, but not in a pathetic, please forgive me, more in a, please forgive me, in a healing way. Yeah. So there you go. How's that?
This question is one of my absolute favorite questions to ask, because the answers come in all sorts of different ways, shapes, and forms. I would love to know a little bit more about this process that you do. Do you do it with a journal? Do you go out on a walk? Do you sit in a quiet space? Or is it all of those on different days?
The connection is before I go to bed normally. So before I go to bed, I'd normally, in my mind, or sometimes out loud, there was a time it was, I am worthy of all the good things that come into my life. That was kind of, because I was going for a really bad time. And we can get a bit rabbit holed, and we kind of keep seeing darkness. And once I started to say that, actually, good things showed up in my life, ironically. So for me, it's a go to bed process. So as I'm unwinding or as I'm closing my eyes, I do that. The forgiveness is anywhere and everywhere, but it's not limited to the bed, by the way. It can pop up. I might just be driving and something comes up. I might feel a bit anxious and I'll say it. But generally speaking, the kind of routine is before I go to bed.
Thank you so much for sharing this, and thank you for being so honest and so vulnerable in your answers. It is really, really inspiring and enlightening as well. I heard Chris Martin today in an interview say that every day for 12 minutes, he writes down all the things that are on his mind and just uses it as an opportunity to empty, clear, forgive, and move on. I feel like this message is coming up in the consciousness, and I love to hear that you are embracing it, living it, walking it. And the more we can get it out there and make it normal, because it is, the more we are going to become the happy, healthy humans that we are here to be. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Elliot, what is one question you haven't been asked that you would have liked to have been asked?
I always like the question, normally at the end of podcasts, is like, what's the one thing you want your audience to take away? And my answer is always the same, by the way. And I think this is a much deeper question. And I always use the question of, when the day comes and we are between worlds, you walk up a path and you see a mirror. Are you going to see the person you became or the person you could have been? And that to me is the idea of heaven or hell. Because heaven is watching the person I became. Hell is watching who I could have been. Who are you going to become? And that's the question I love. I love ending podcasts or interviews on, because it's a very deep and profound. And a lot of people have even messaged me going, wow, you really got me to think, because I feel it's a very potent question. Now, I believe, not out of arrogance, I believe I'm going to see the person I became, because I'm working very hard to become that daily. And it's not an easy path, right? I think there's a little bit of that Hollywood, montage, I'll just decide and everything will happen. I'm following my life. It's just not like that. I mean, I'm so happy if someone has got that. They made a decision, everyone fell on their lap. Well done to them. That's not my path. But I do believe that with everything that I'm doing and where I come from a place of wanting to be the best version for myself, for my kids, and my wife and the people around me. But that doesn't necessarily mean Malcolm X, Martin Luther King level global shifts, although that'd be nice. I'm not limiting, because remember, I am an unlimited being, only limited by my physical body. When and if that happens, I welcome it. My point is, I want to be able to look in the mirror and see the person I became. And that's a daily thing as well. When I look in that mirror and go, okay, you're pretty cool. You're a cool dude. Just keep working on these things. And so I feel that's the question.
That is such an incredible question. Thank you for sharing. And we have not finished yet. I still have
No, I know. But yeah.
I still have some more questions for you. This is the question for the person who is in that place of overwhelm. They can see, maybe they can hear, maybe they resonate with what you're saying, but they're way, way, way farther away from that right now. They're in that place of overwhelm. I don't have time. Nothing's working. I stand up and I speak and I just feel nervous. What would you say to that person is a good first step?
First step is stop. Take a breath. Pause. Right? Two things. It's never as bad as we think it is. Number one. So let's just pause, reflect. Then it's about putting the winnable steps in place that will help build you up. So this is more your territory. When anyone's overwhelmed, it means they're looking at too many things at once and often too big, right? In my experience. So, what are the things we can shrink down? What are the small winnable steps? Do we need to just stop, pause? Do we need to look at a structure? Do we need to look at the time? Do we need can we look at a practice timeline? So what are the winnables that we can put in place that will help with the overwhelm and everything that's going on in your head? What work do we need to do on your mindset? So I would strip it back and break it down more, so then everything feels achievable. And also something, again, this is more deep than it is. It's both deep and practical, is detachment. Like, I will talk a lot about detaching from outcomes. So aim for an outcome. And again, in the webinar, I talked about living in progress, but aiming for perfection, right? So let's let go of perfection. Let's live in progress. Let's detach from the outcome, because there's so many things you can't control, but let's control what we can do. So can you practice? Can you control practicing 3 times a week? Can you practice working on your breath as we speak? Can you practice the pauses? Yes, I can. All right. That's what I mean. Let's look at the winnables. What are the small winnables that, again, accumulatively come together and have a massive result? Let's start looking at the detail more versus the overall. That's why I'll say someone's feeling overwhelmed. And I said this because I am working with, currently, I'm mentoring an actress. She's quite well known. And obviously when a role comes in or audition, she kind of obviously drops things. And then by the time we talk, she's like, oh, I've had this, because she's quite established. And I'm like, you need to book the time in like you would an audition, like you would practicing your role. That needs to go in your diary, practice speech. And again, for someone that's feeling overwhelmed, you need to create that space in your diary as much as in your head. And that will help with the overwhelm.
Those are some great top tips there. The other thing I would say is a plug for the podcast. Listen to the podcast and listen to episodes where I am bringing on guests who are showing you the possibility, the potentiality, and the proof they've been on the journey. As Elliot has said on this episode, he has ridden the roller coaster. So use him as the proof that no matter how challenging it looks right now, there is another chapter to this story. The sun is on the other side of the cloud. Thank you for sharing that. Final question. What have you got coming up over the next 6-12 months?
Good question. There'll be a webinar on the archetypes. I haven't got the page up yet, but that will be there. There is talk about writing the book about the archetypes. I might put my head down and write my 8th book, but this one will be published if I write it, versus my 7th book, which is sitting on my laptop right now. And I think we've got the awards coming up, the speaker awards coming up in July. So a lot of attention goes to that. I'm having some very high level conversation with some very people influential in the industry So keep an eye out on that as well. And, I think amongst those things that's enough for now. I think, again, talking about time management, we often can overwhelm ourselves with what we want to achieve. So I'm going to stop at those 3.
That sounds so exciting. And as always, we will leave all of the links to everything in the show notes. And if you resonated with the archetypes and are interested in hearing more and would like to make Elliot writing the book more of a priority on his to-do list, then let us know wherever you're listening to this podcast. Also reach out on social media, because I, for one, would love to read this book and attend this training, because I think it is so invaluable for us as speakers to learn how to use different elements of stories to engage different parts of the audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where do you hang out on social media?
I'm a LinkedIn kind of guy. I'm afraid I'm not on any other platform except for LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with me, it's Elliot spelled the correct well, Elliot and then Kay. And there's a picture of me like this. I think I look like this, So yeah, feel free. That's where I hang out, social media. Nowhere else, I'm afraid. The Speaker Awards has more presence than I am, but for now, just LinkedIn.
Elliot, thank you so much for your time and all of your top tips that you have shared with us today.
My pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
And until next time, my friends, remember, stay safe, stay well, and it is your time. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you loved what you heard, be sure to let me know by leaving a review so I can keep the good stuff coming. Come and say hi on Instagram at Success by Design Training, or visit my website, successbydesigntraining.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Abigail Barnes. Until next time, don't forget, you are amazing and it's your time.